Hey everyone, it's Nick here with Montgomery Financial Services, and today I have for you our Q4 coaching class. I hope you've all had a great year here in 2022 and that you've been enjoying the holidays so far and that you're ready to ring in the new year. And that's also because our coaching class topic today is centered around the idea of New Year's resolutions and goals and how that applies to your financial plan. So hopefully you can watch this video. It's right before the New Year's. It should get out right before the New Year's at least. So you can maybe come up with, we're going to go over 6 financial resolutions or goals, 6 financial resolutions or goals that maybe you can follow up on and craft a plan to stay on track with in 2023. So let's get into it. Number 1, financial goal or resolution number 1 is to create a budget in 2023. Now, I know budgeting may seem a little elementary when it comes to financial planning. It's very basic, but I cannot stress the importance that having a budget, or at least knowing how your money is being spent, what your expenses are, how important that is to a financial plan. Okay, and I often tell folks that at its core, financial planning, it's really simple. It's money coming in and money going out. And then whatever that difference is, whether it's positive or negative, hopefully it's positive, right? It's what we're doing with that. If it's negative, it's, well, where's that money coming from to meet your expenses? So again, it's very important to take a look at what you're spending. And for our clients, if you're a client of ours, of course, you know that we like to break our expenses down really into 2 different categories. Category number 1 are our minimum dignity expenses. So that's going to be the expenses we have for the rest of our lives, right? That's going to be paying for housing, whether it's rent or a mortgage, utilities, okay, food, transportation, and then healthcare. Those are the 5 basic expenses that you need to make sure you're covering at all times that we'll also have for the rest of our lives. So make sure you know what you're spending on the minimum dignity expenses side of the budget here, as well as what are what we call discretionary spending. So those are your expenses that are like, you know, going out to eat, traveling, gifts, things of that nature. So again, understanding, crafting a budget, breaking down your expenses into those 2 categories is a great way of doing that. And we've actually crafted a nice little budget sheet that we'll have available for you to download. We'll put a link in this video here in the video description where you can download that budget sheet to then take a look at your expenses. And again, fill it out as, maybe you print out 2 budget sheets. Fill out what you know you're spending in those areas, and maybe if you want to decrease spending, you can fill out what your goal would be then in those certain areas. And of course, you know, 2022 has kind of become the year of inflation, right? Inflation has hit a lot of Americans very hard in this country. I think right now, year to date, we're right around 7% is what the inflation figures are reading. So it's not uncommon that trip to the grocery store that used to cost, you know, maybe $150 is now costing closer to $200. So take some time, even if you have a pretty good handle on your budget, to just go through that and review it to make sure that you're still on track, okay? And on that same note, also plan in your budget for any large expenses that you may have coming up. Maybe it's a wedding, maybe it's the birth of a new child or grandchild and you want to plan for expenses in that way. Maybe it's a new car that you need to budget for, boat, whatever it is. If you do have large expenses coming up, make sure that you're planning for those in the budget, okay? Next up, and in that same spirit, financial resolution number 2 is to make sure you have an adequate emergency fund. So what's an emergency fund when it comes to financial planning? Well, really it's just a rainy day fund, right? If something happens, we always say if, the hot water heater goes, you need a new transmission on your car, a new roof, whatever it is, you have money set aside, highly liquid money set aside, where you can get to that right away to pay for those large expenses. So what are let's back up here, start with the basics. What would be considered a proper emergency fund in terms of investments, right? Well, cash okay, liquid cash, whether that's actual physical cash you have at home, in a safe. Hopefully it's a fireproof safe, I always say. But physical cash on hand, money or cash in a checking account or a savings account at a bank, money market accounts, CDs, again, highly liquid funds that you can get to if you're in a pinch, and get to it very quickly is also the key there. But also assets that are safe, meaning that they're safe and guaranteed. So if it's money invested with the bank, of course, that's all FDIC insured money. But really what that means is, from an investment risk perspective, if the market is not doing so great, that investment is safe to that extent. So make sure your emergency fund is built up with cash assets, safe investment products that cannot be harmed by any kind of market turbulence, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But that's what you would build your emergency fund with. So next question is, we know why to have an emergency fund, as well as what to use to build our emergency fund. The question is how much, what's an ample amount to have in that emergency fund? So oftentimes we tell our clients to shoot for anywhere between 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months worth of expenses in the emergency fund. And of course, that's a pretty wide range. So you might be asking, well, how do I determine what's right for me? Well, let's start out with on the low end, okay? Folks who need a 3-month emergency fund. Typically going to be couples, so married couples that do not have any dependents in their household necessarily, that have strong sources of income. So if you're retired, maybe you're collecting your pension and Social Security, those are pretty strong guaranteed source of income coming in. If you're still working and you have some pretty good job security there, again, a reason why a 3-month emergency fund may be right for you. Next up then, 6 months, kind of again, and then 12 months, of course, on the other end of the spectrum. Those are for folks who maybe are a little bit more conservative, okay? They're a little bit more risk averse, and they want a bigger safety blanket or safety net, so to speak. Or if you also have, young children or dependents, or if you're really the sole income earner in your family, that would be another reason why to err on the side of maybe 12 months of expenses in emergency fund products. Now, the question, of course, that we sometimes get is, well, why not have more? What's the harm of having 2 years worth of expenses, 3 years worth of expenses down in the emergency fund? And of course, you're going to know how much X amount of expenses are, or X amount of months expenses are, rather, in the emergency fund, because you've done the budget, right? You do the budget, you know what your expenses are. But the reason to not have a large amount, or a 2-year emergency fund, for instance, is mainly because the money that's sitting in these products that are cash assets, CDs, money market accounts, really aren't growing a whole lot, okay? And when we just talked about inflation a few seconds ago, if the cost of goods are rising at 7% and the money sitting in your checking or savings account is maybe making pennies of interest, so to speak, it doesn't make sense to have that money sitting on the sideline, so to speak. So you don't want to have too much sitting in your emergency fund. That's why it's important to, number one, understand what your expenses are with the budget, and number two, understand then, well, now that I know my budget, do I want a 3-month, a 6-month, or a whole year's worth of expenses then in those highly liquid, easy to get to, and safe funds in the emergency fund? And of course, if you have any large expenses planned, like I mentioned, that can also be sitting in the emergency fund. That's going to be money that's kind of earmarked for that large expense. And then the other reason that I always like to talk about is, it is important to have an emergency fund. So when we get into this next topic here, having an emergency fund prevents you from getting into debt, taking out loans for things that you need. If your hot water heater goes up and you need to take out a loan, that's a payment with interest. So we're going to talk about debt here in a second, but really the purpose of the emergency fund is so you don't have to run up that credit card if there's an emergency. You don't have to take out loans, okay? Which is great because, again, financial resolution number 3 is to manage or even eliminate debt. But let's face it, we all know debt isn't necessarily the greatest thing out there, but it can happen. It's easy to swipe that card. If you go buy a new vehicle, having a payment there is a little bit easier than paying cash sometimes, or all the completely in cash. So I understand, look, debt happens, and agree or disagree with its uses. I think we can all kind of agree on the fact that it's not fun to have payments that are also going to pay out interest rates, right? Because those interest rates over the long run, that can really kind of hurt you. That can add up. So let's just agree or look towards maybe paying down that debt or eliminating it. So how do we go about that if this does apply to you? If you don't have any debt, of course, you can skip on to the next financial resolution. But how do we manage debt? Well, we take in Dave Ramsey's philosophy. So for those of you who are familiar with Dave, he's developed what's called the debt snowball plan. Okay, it's the idea of how to attack debt in an aggressive manner. So whether it's whether you have a whole lot or maybe just a couple credit cards here and there, this is, again, it applies in either scenario there. So what you do with the debt snowball is you eliminate in terms of smallest to largest. Okay, so smallest debt to largest, working your way all the way up to, of course, your house, if you have a mortgage, that is. So you would find if it's a credit card, you would pay, of course, the minimum on that credit card, but then anything else that you can afford to in your monthly budget, you're going to want to throw on that credit card. And eventually, that credit card is going to pay itself off. You then take that money from that debt, if it's a credit card in this instance, and throw it onto the next thing. Maybe it's a car payment. So what you were paying on the credit card, plus all that extra money, is now going onto the car until you pay that off, and then so on and so forth. You work your way up the ladder. And again, I've seen many families and many clients as well use this debt snowball to pay off mountains of debt in no time at all. So it's just a way of attacking debt in kind of an aggressive manner to get it out, which is a great goal to have for the new year. And some people do the size of the debt. Other people like to focus on what's the highest interest rate. If you have a 12% credit card, 12% interest rate credit card, maybe get rid of that one first before you get on to the car that's maybe 3 or 4%, so to speak. So you can, again, tweak it and customize it to whatever fits your needs, but it's a good principle to, again, pay down debt and make sure that you are getting that handled. So, and then once you have your mortgage left, of course, that's where it becomes, because mortgages can be obviously quite large. This is where maybe, as opposed to throwing everything you can, that's important. You can put as much money into that as possible, paying off your principal. But another fun strategy, if you don't want to necessarily do that, is to maybe just make an extra payment per year or per month. Throwing a little bit extra on the principal, again, can significantly impact the longevity of that mortgage. There are a lot of calculators online. We also have access to some calculators that can show you the positive effects of putting extra towards the principal and how long that will then cut the mortgage down in terms of its lifespan. So again, not a bad idea. You can utilize the debt snowball and then the mortgage payoff to really make some great things happen then. Because the best part about being debt-free is that if you did have a lot of payments, right, once you're debt-free, there's all that money now in your cash flow that you can do stuff with. So that's awesome. So excellent. The next resolution is to save more. All right, save more in 2023 if you can. So this is the next step. So after you've figured out your budget, you've figured out your emergency fund, what you need in there, you've paid off all your debt, the next step then is to save more. Now, when it comes to saving, of course, you can kind of put money into a checking or a savings account and have that kind of earmarked. But what I'm more so suggesting is maybe you take money and you put it into your brokerage account, right? Your non-retirement account. Maybe you put it into your IRA or Roth IRA. Or if you're still working and you have access to a 401k, you can put money into the 401k, a 403b if you have access, if you're a teacher or in the healthcare industry, you can have a 403b, and then 457bs for our government and city employees, so to speak. So saving more for retirement specifically is a great goal to have. As a rule of thumb, right, often folks will ask, well, how much should I be saving? We like to save, or we like to tell our clients at least 15% of your income should be put towards retirement savings specifically. So 15% of whatever your income is, that's what you should be saving. And of course, if you have what I call an employee-sponsored plan, right? Those plans typically, and again, if you haven't done any research with your work situation, if you have access to one of these, that's the first step. Reach out to your HR department, see if you have access to a 401k, a 403b, 457, and see what they match, okay? Because if those company plans are matching, that just means that the most common one is maybe around 5%. If that employee plan is matching 5%, you better be putting in 5% because that's 100% return on your money. That's free money, so to speak. So check and see if your company offers a plan and if they offer a match, and then sign up for that ASAP if that's the case, okay? But 15% total, that's always a good goal to have. The other thing here is that for 2023, there's actually been some increases to what you can put into retirement plans specifically, okay? For IRAs, those contribution limits, and I'll put them up on the screen here so you can get a good look at all the changes here, but for IRAs, you can now put up to $6,500, $6,500 per year into an IRA or Roth IRA. And then the catch-up contribution is another $1,000, okay? So $7,500. And then same thing for 401ks, 403bs, there's a significant increase as to what you can put in compared to 2022 to 2023. For those who want to max out their employee-sponsored plans or max out any of their retirement savings vehicles, we've gotten a nice little bump. So that's kind of the, I guess, the silver lining of inflation is that these contribution limits have gone up as well. So again, I know most of you have already have a savings plan kind of intact or implemented in your plan. Just review it, see if these new contribution limits mean anything to you and if you can up what you're saving, because again, it's good to save now for later on in retirement, if you're still saving, that is. And of course, with that, if you can't do 15%, that's perfectly okay. Start with a smaller amount, maybe 10%, 5%. If it's a dollar amount for some of our younger clients, who are just starting out maybe, or if it's to your kids or grandchildren, if you're going to recommend to them that, hey, you need to start saving money for retirement, set up a monthly contribution with a certain amount, and then eventually, your lifestyle is going to kind of change around that money that's going into the account, and you'll get used to having that much less in your monthly budget because it's going towards savings. Okay? All right, financial resolution number 5 is to review your portfolio. I don't really need to state the fact that 2022 was sort of a turbulent time in the markets, okay? So specifically in your portfolio, in your investment portfolio, it's good to take a look at, how those investments did, and then take a couple steps then in terms of preparing for 2023. So the most important one, in my opinion, would be to rebalance your accounts if needed. Now, of course, if you're a client of ours, we rebalance those accounts for you. But if you have investments in a 401k or an account outside, or if you're not a client of ours, of course, it's a good time to take a look at your investment positions and maybe do some rebalancing. Now, I know we have some videos focused solely on rebalancing. We've done some coaching classes or videos in the past, so maybe a link to those in the description if we have. But just to kind of summarize and recap what rebalancing is, it's the idea of making calculated investment decisions based on how your portfolio is invested right now because of the market movements versus what your goals were when you first established that investment. So, for instance, equities on average, and right now, as of the date that I'm filming this, I think we're down about across the 3 major indexes. It's around 20% is what the market is down this year across the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, and the Dow Jones. Just in general, when we have a market movement like that, the portion of our portfolio that is invested in equities, so stocks, ETFs, mutual funds, equity holdings, is going to be down. So what we need to do relative to, so it's going to be down in your portfolio, what we need to do is we need to rebalance you, meaning that we buy more of those equities because we view that as on sale. So again, if you're a client of ours, we're already doing that for you. We've done that for you throughout 2022 because those were great opportunities to buy more shares at a lower price. Okay, so and then on the second end of that, then it's of course selling. So we're buying low and then we're selling high, which is the idea of selling the positions in your portfolio that may have done well throughout the year or throughout a period to buy more of those equities. So again, rebalancing just gets you back to what your target was in the beginning when you set up the investment portfolio or when we engineered and built the portfolio for you. So the other thing then with your investments, when you're kind of reviewing and taking inventory of them, is to just make sure that your investments are in line with your financial plan. And we always tell our clients, really it comes down to three things when you pick an investment, okay? What is the goal of the money that you're investing? Maybe it's for retirement, maybe it's for a major expense coming down the line, maybe you're saving up to buy a house, whatever it might be. Establish or determine or identify, rather, the goal of that money. Number two, what is your time horizon with that money? So if you're retiring, of course the time horizon is going to be how long until you retire. Or if you're living on that money, it's how long you need that money to last. But it's important to make sure that you know what your time horizon is with this money when you're deciding on the investment or when you're building an investment portfolio. And then the last principle that we apply is what is your risk tolerance, right? Now again, risk, especially in 2022, very important concept. It's the idea of how much are you comfortable, how much can you tolerate when it comes to the volatility, the level of volatility that we've been experiencing in the market. So again, each investment portfolio, every investment decision, just refer back to those three things to think about. What's the goal? What is your time horizon? And then what is your personal risk tolerance? And for those of you who don't know what your risk tolerance is, we of course have our risk questionnaire that you can fill out. We'll have a link to that in the description as well, where you can take a quiz that'll tell you on a scale of 1 to 100 how much risk you're comfortable with. And then it's important as a follow-up step to make sure that your investment portfolio as a whole is somewhere closer matched up with that risk number, because if they are, that can typically lead to peace of mind when it comes to your portfolio when we have these market fluctuations. Okay, so make sure again, from an investment perspective, that you are in line with both your portfolio and then your financial plan. And I always say, look, another year's come and gone. There have been life changes. Maybe you decided to retire. Of course, everyone's now a year older. So with life changes, we can sometimes change our portfolio objectives, and those three things change. Our risk tolerances change as we get older, as years go by. If you're retired especially, that can change. Time horizons, of course, change. And then, of course, your goal can change. So we need to know what's happened in your life if there is any reason to change up the portfolio. So again, take the risk questionnaire if you want, and ultimately meet with your financial advisor or with a member of our team, of course, if you want to discuss your investment portfolio. All right, and last but not least, our final New Year's resolution is to review your estate plan. So really when it comes to estate planning, I like to sum this up as, not leaving a mess behind, okay? A mess for your beneficiaries, for your spouse, the executor of your will, and also it's making sure that your loved ones are taken care of if something were to happen to you. So with estate planning, I always make sure that when I'm meeting with my clients or our clients here, that we have an updated will in place, okay? Updated trusts if need be, medical directives, things like that. Just making sure that those are all up to date and in the same mindset of when you originally established the estate plan, right? It's also important because I know folks are moving to the area or may have moved from Maryland or Delaware to another area and vice versa. Make sure that your will, if you have a will, is valid in the state that you're living in, all right? This has come up many times in this past year, because if you pass away and you do not have a will that's valid in your own state, you can really run into some estate planning problems there. And on that same note, of course, I'm not an estate planning attorney. If you need a referral for an estate planner, we can absolutely set you up with one of those. Just give us a call or an email, and based on your needs, we can, and where you're located, of course, we can maybe refer you out to some folks who can get your estate plan in order. When it comes to your financial accounts, though, and estate planning, it's really about making sure that you're named beneficiaries. So 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs, brokerage accounts will have a named beneficiary on them. So make sure your named beneficiaries are still how you want it, and those percentages as well. because any kind of a named beneficiary is going to bypass a will or the probate process. So just keep that in mind. And again, if you need any help with your estate plan, please do not hesitate to reach out. So what are my closing thoughts on all this? And what is the best way to stick to these resolutions? Well, let me start up by saying that goal setting is a great habit to have, all right? It's awesome. I feel like the new year especially provides a great fresh start, right? A blank slate, so to speak. So no better time to start having goal setting habits or building goal setting habits than the new year here in 2023. But it's been kind of proven, there's studies have been done that to stick to these goals, one of the best things that you can do is to write down these goals. So that's where I would start. It can be on a sticky note, it can be in your journal, it can be a note in your phone that you have, right? Write down these goals that you have. Maybe it's some of the ones that we went over today, right? You don't have to do everything that we talked about today. I just wanted to kind of throw some ideas out there with what you can do as it regards to your financial plan. But maybe you can also do this in life with your other life resolutions or goals that you have. Write it down, all right? Somewhere that you can refer back to those pretty easily, right, if you need to. So write them down and refer back to those often. That's one way to stay consistent. The other way is really to set realistic goals. You don't want to set far-fetched goals, but at the same time, you don't want to undershoot, your goals. So somewhere right in the middle, something that's realistic, that's obtainable or achievable in your eyes. Make that decision when you're deciding on the goals that you want to accomplish this year and the new resolutions. So that's my advice, at least. Again, I'm no expert on goal setting. There are a lot of experts out there. One of my favorite is Darren Hardy. For those of you who have maybe read his book, The Compound Effect, that's a great book to read as well. Maybe a good tip for New Year's reading. But there are a lot of people out there that have done studies and are more gurus when it comes to the goal setting and keeping of goals. So at any rate, this was your quarter 4 coaching class with Montgomery Financial. I'm Nick, and again, I hope you have a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year. And I look forward to seeing you all in the new year. And if you, again, have any questions or comments, please do not hesitate to reach out.